Part two with Larry Merchant. This is Steve Kim for UCN Live. Larry, let's talk about some of the other general topics currently in the sport of boxing. We're about a year and a half coming up on 2 years on the PBC. Your thoughts on the impact on the sport?
Unfortunately, it's negative. I was a skeptic that Al Heyman could pull this thing off with reported $500 million from venture capitalists to try to buy up the top boxers out there and put them on all those television platforms. I was hopeful, but given the trends, I didn't see how we could pull it off, and he hasn't. And I think the fact that some of his good fighters have not had the big platforms on HBO and Showtime has hurt them. That's where fighters' reputations have been made over the last couple of decades, and he has not been able. He's found that you can't just put a fight out there the way you put Beyonce out there,
Like a concert.
like a concert, right? It's got to be a fight. There's got to be stories. There's got to be tumulting. And you just can't sit out there as an unknown promoter and expect the fighters themselves to make these fights just by the fights. And there have been some good ones.
Yeah. Larry, when you look at the situation of boxing, there's been so many fights on different platforms. I know you watch fights. We talk about them over a weekend. You'll say, did you see this? Did you find it hard to keep track of all their events?
Yeah. I didn't know some events were happening. Maybe they were designed in such a way that it was not going to reach out to the audience. Look, I've said to you for a year, Steve, that if Wilder emerges as a real deal, and he's on the shelf now with an injury, and should happen to win a heavyweight championship, maybe all this changes, okay? Because he can be exciting because he is a big personality. And maybe that's the last and only hope they have.
Larry, do you find any similarities to what Al Heyman did to Harold Smith? Is this Harold Smith on HGH?
In a way, Harold Smith was a guy decades ago who pilfered money from
Wells Fargo.
Yeah. Which is back
That's ironic we bring them up, yeah.
Back in the news, and was signing up fighters and offering them out what was considered outrageous fees to fight and so on and so forth. And he must have been a big boxing fan and was just, and trying to outdo Don King back in the day. And in a sense, Heyman became the Wall Street version of that. He's a legitimate promoter who comes from the music world, but he played the notes, but not the music in boxing.
Larry, you brought up Deontay Wilder, the WBC champion. Another young belt holder is Anthony Joshua out of the UK, who I think has the look, as you like to say. Larry, Joshua Wilder. Is that the heavyweight matchup to look forward to in about 2 years?
It would be if they advance their careers, if they behave like real heavyweights, and Wilder's record is pretty good, as is Joshua. If they emerge, then those would be big deals. And of course, Joshua is a Brit, and if Tyson Fury should go on and beat Klitschko again and maybe win something else, they could fill the country, much less an outdoor stadium for a fight of that dimension. So, second things second, third things third. Let's see Wilder get better and fight a substantial opponent.
Larry, one of the bright young stars and one of the best all-around talents boxing has is a young man out of Omaha, Nebraska by the name of Terrence Crawford. Is he the next great African-American star? Does he kind of fill that void left by maybe Mayweather?
Well, I don't know if he's going to be a star.
Okay.
if anybody can help somebody become a star who has it in them to be a star, it's certainly Arum and Top Rank. They've done that over and over. Why Crawford isn't coming back this year, I don't know. He should be out there more. I believe he's the best young American fighter. If he wants to be a star, he's got to get exposure one way or another. I don't think he has a big star personality, but there are good opponents out there for him, including Pacquiao, and I'm hopeful that he explodes.
Larry, let's go back. 1990. It was actually my senior year of high school, and I thought the game of boxing got off to a great start. February 10th, Tyson beats Douglas, and then 5 weeks later, Chavez beats Taylor. What do you remember about that stretch of time?
It was, of course, it was like everybody got hit with a left hook and a right cross. I mean, whoa. But it wasn't all that unusual for there to be big back-to-back events that became fights. Okay, and I remember we saw Aaron Pryor one weekend in a big fight,
Arguello?
Against Arguello, and then 2 weeks later we're in New Orleans, and there's a fight that's a virtual replay of that. I don't.
Lupe Pintor, I think, was involved.
Pintor was involved.
Gomez,
yes.
Fredo Gomez.
Yeah, well,
great fight. What a fight!
Whoa. So that happens sometime, and in this case, there was a shock, and that drama of the heavyweight championship turning over, and then the controversy surrounding the end of the Chavez-Taylor fight, and those things turned a buzz into an uproar that lasted for a long time.
And regardless of what shirt I'm wearing right now, I still think that was a horrible stoppage. Meldrick Taylor, that was an injustice. The reason why I asked that, because Larry, both fights, and looking back, they were on regular HBO. I mean, there used to be a universe when HBO would put those fights on for their regular subscribers. I'm sure you've read the reports of HBO's budget. I'm sure you've heard things. They don't have a live fight for a while now. Larry, you look back at your old employer and do you say, what's going on there? Do you think, are they still into boxing?
In a way, yes. I think it reflects the fact that, in some part, that America isn't producing heavyweights who attract the casual fans. You got to remember, at that time we had it was early in the Riddick Bowe era, and we had Holyfield, and we had George Foreman coming back, and we had
Lennox Lewis.
And Lennox Lewis coming up, and Tyson. So I think that's just part of it. There's just not enough Americans, and those who are good, who are getting exposure, and the right kind of exposure. And at HBO, it means, are they willing to market their product and show they're proud of it?
Larry, you came up with a great quote, I think it was a week after the Pacquiao-Bradley first fight, and you said about boxing, ain't nothing gonna save it, ain't nothing gonna kill it, but we still have these obituaries being read, and you said, yeah, Steve, boxing is dead in America. And I know you say that kind of as a joke. What do you see as the future of the business? How do you think it needs to evolve from its current place?
Well, I do think that, like other sports, it's more an international game. There have always been international fights, but those fighters are more and more important. Prize fighting is big in Japan, big in Germany, big in Britain. It's had a total revival, which is makes makes it hopeful that somebody can come back and give it a jolt. I've been around long enough to see when there was a low period, and Muhammad Ali gave it a jolt. So we've been there and done that, but boxing is what it is, no longer a mainstream sport, but it has an avid following, and the expectations for huge dollars being generated are still there, and Canelo Alvarez is still going to put a lot of asses and eyeballs in seats.
Larry, you mentioned him, the greatest. Muhammad Ali passed away early June, someone that you covered extensively. You were very close with at certain times as a member of the media back in New York. Muhammad Ali, I read a book, and he basically used to proclaim, if it wasn't for me, the game would be dead. Was he really that important in the 60s, as you just kind of mentioned?
He was. I can recall going even farther back. Sugar Ray Robinson, the great Robinson, had a trainer-manager who was called George the Emperor Gainsford. And it must be 60, 65 years ago that he was being asked, where are all the fighters?
Right.
And he said, I see them in Harlem every day. They're playing basketball.
Larry, Muhammad Ali, so much has been written and said since his passing. It's been a couple of months. We've had time to digest all of it. As you look back at his time in his life and his career, what are some of your thoughts now, as opposed to, let's say, 3 months ago?
Well, it was apparent back in the day that he was a worldwide figure. There were many people who revered him and many people who reviled him. But he transcended borders, oceans, mountain ranges. His fame was worldwide. And eventually, the people who didn't like him for one reason or another earlier resisted to him because he was so brave in and out of the ring. They acknowledged the risks he took in and out of the ring. And I've always felt that where he started to turn things around, in which those people who reviled him started to revere him, was immediately after the first fight with Joe Frazier, when he was all over television, smiling, giving Frazier credit. And it was much like a famous line of Jack Dempsey, who was also revered and reviled back in the day, when after he lost to Tunney, he got knocked down in one of the fights, and he said, I forgot to duck. And it somehow humanized him. And today, when they talk about Dempsey Tunney, it's always Dempsey first.
Right. All right, well, that's it for this segment with Larry Merchant. When we come back, we wrap it up with Ask Larry.